I would like to, as we go through the day, through the session, talk to you a bit in theory about what a foreign journalist and correspondent does when they're on location, and also look at it from a practical point of view as well. Because what I'd like you to have at the end of this session is a very clear idea of what a foreign correspondent does in a host country, and also some tools with which to interact with the press in your future careers. So thank you for being here. We shall start with looking at what the press does. I like to liken it to opening up a black box. Oops, we are. Here we go. Let's see if that stays. I like to liken it to, no, it doesn't stay. Maybe I need to ask Raffaele for some assistance. Thank you, because it goes on its own. I like to liken it to opening up a black box, because seen from the outside, it's quite difficult and confusing to understand what a foreign correspondent's mission is in a host country. And there's a lot of noise. The press is changing quite substantially. Artificial intelligence has also done that. You know, there is quite a bit of, let's just give a second for this to be sorted out. While we sort it out, I just want to tell you, I will run through the theory and then a bit of practice, actually back to front practice and then theory, and then open up the session to questions. So we can also do perhaps some case studies as well, some interactive case studies as well. And I think AI has taken control of our screen, so we shall carry on anyway. So a foreign correspondent that's based in Italy or in any other host country to effect basically obviously covers the news for their publication. So that makes their news cover and their interest in what's going on in that particular country very different from the journalists that are based in the host country. So, for example, if you're a journalist at ANSA or Corriere della Sera, which are some of the biggest Italian and mainstream Italian newspapers, or Sole 24 Ore, which is the main financial one, you'll be doing very different things from what a correspondent for the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times or for the Guardian is, to all effects. Can I have the pointer? Thank you. Fantastic. Is that? Like an automatic moment. Okay. Okay, so I'll just keep going back. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll do that. Okay, so as we said, so theory and practice, it's very different what a foreign correspondent does from what a local journalist does. So let me give you a few examples in terms of cover. Recently, some of the big international interest points were the flotilla and the demonstrations in Italy. And this was a news point in which both Italian interest and foreign interest very much aligned. So obviously, there was a lot of cover both in the Italian newspapers and the Italian televisions and in the foreign newspapers and televisions. Obviously, a newspaper from Japan will be less interested. A newspaper from Turkey or the UK or France or Spain will have much more interest, clearly, or Israel, obviously. And in practical terms, I spent a lot of the last few weeks on the road with demonstrations, following the events, interviewing people, talking to representatives of the flotilla, but literally on the street for days and days and days. Because it was quite exceptional, the demonstrations that were going on in Italy. They had taken place all over Europe, but Italy was quite exceptional in that the masses of people that were out on the street on an ongoing basis, day after day, were quite unique. So this gives you an example of what I'm doing in Italy, the news cover of a correspondent in Italy. Clearly, there's also the Vatican in Italy. So anyone who's based in Rome very much follows the popes and, their events and their trips and their calls for unity, peace, anything they say really is pretty much of interest because there's so many billions of Catholics around the world. So that's a huge news interest point. And clearly the last year has been very much focused on, Pope Francis's various health issues, his hospitalizations, his surgery, and then his very sad demise, his having passed away. And then obviously the new Pope as well, clearly the election of Pope Leo. Those sort of situations involve round-the-clock work. You never know when it'll happen, when there is big breaking news, and this can be, papal news, but it can be anything really. It can be, a government collapse. It can be a big natural disaster. It can be anything. And, you can be having dinner or lunch, or you can be on a trip in the mountains or skiing and, big breaking news, and you have to drop everything and leave. So it's also quite a complex lifestyle as well. Quite disorganized, I like to say, because you never really know what you'll be doing the next days or weeks or sometimes even hours. Again, on the street reporting, lots of television cover for Italy. I actually am not just a television correspondent. I'm also a reporter, Italy correspondent for People magazine, which is incidentally the most read magazine in the world because, there's so much interest in entertainment, Hollywood stars, the Oscars, Jennifer Lopez, George Clooney and so forth. So I cover Italy for People magazine, and obviously that involves travel, that involves a lot of high-end events, cover the Venice Film Festival, Taormina, Madonna's birthday party, George Clooney events at Lago di Como, some sad ones as well. The Bayesian yacht that went down in Sicily last August, 2 Augusts ago, with billionaire Mike Lynch from the UK on board and many other people who lost their lives. And that involved a lot of interest from all over, and not just from People, obviously, but from many news publications. And clearly Amal Clooney, many of her philanthropic and, human rights events and missions. And that sort of overlaps with George Clooney's cinema attraction, obviously. And I'm also, by background, I'm an economist. I went to the London School of Economics. I did a master's at Cambridge, and that's my sort of core background. So I do still carry on writing in terms of the financial, technical energy markets. And one of the publications I work for is Montel News, which is, I like to liken it to a Bloomberg for the energy markets. As we were saying earlier, in Italy, a lot of the cover is Vatican related. I had the great privilege of being able to travel with Pope Francis to the 4 corners of the world. Incredible privilege, very interesting. It's obviously a lot more glamorous seen from the outside than the inside because it involves being woken up, having to get up at 4 in the morning for security checks and so forth. And just to give you a bit of context of what a foreign correspondent can do as they're abroad, one of the things I've been involved with is the Italian Golden Globes, which I coordinated. I was artistic director of with a colleague for 5-6 years. That's sort of the practice. So it gives you a flavor of what I do in this Meet the Press session. In theory, I would like to give you an idea of looking at the black box from the inside. So a newsroom seen from the outside seems very clearly, organized, very delineated. Everything seems to be in its place. It's often depicted in this way. And in fact, If you see the show, The Newsroom, Raffaele, perdonami, posso chiederti solo questo, che si è spento. Sorry. Oh, I didn't see that. Apologies. Yeah, that's fine. Shall we wait a moment for this to be? Yeah. Anyway, I will carry on. Just giving you, it's nice to have some of the illustration behind in terms of what we do. But in terms of organization and seeing the newsroom from the outside, very often it's depicted as a very organized, clearly systematic way of working. And I had some illustrations of the show, The Newsroom, which is great. It's fantastic. It's a great show. And when you see it, it's very elegant newsrooms with everyone very, organized and very, very like stable. Fantastic. Here we are. Okay, so I don't know if we saw this earlier, but so this is some of the financial journalism I do, the energy journalism. And this is, as I was saying, traveling with Pope Francis. This is one of the great privileges, I think, of being based in Italy as a news reporter. You end up covering the Vatican. And also, this is the Italian Golden Globes that I was involved in coordinating. And here we are. This is where we left off. So the newsroom. Okay, well, I'll go without the images. We shall jump ahead. Oh, here we go. This is what a newsroom actually looks like. So you will see a very tidy, organized newsrooms in television shows, but in actual fact, it's often chaos because obviously people do not know what they'll be doing next time. You're full of documents, even in today's day and age when everything is, a lot of the things are digital. There's a lot of documentation, annual reports, think tank reports, and so forth, stacking up on your desk. And so it gives you an idea. Okay, we're here. Perfect. So again, foreign correspondence job involves a lot of travel, a lot of going to events. The Venice Film Festival as well, that's something I've been covering for about 17, 18 years, I'm embarrassed to say. But in actual fact, this work seen from the outside seems extremely, I always like to use the term glamorous, but it's actually very tough. It involves very long hours. It involves a lot of, preparation work beforehand. It involves a lot of research. And, here you can see the Venice Film Festival, Jennifer Lopez, Ben Affleck. And if you look behind them, I'm not even looking at them because I'm reporting on something else. This is me behind them. So you can see you're really involved in the nuts and bolts of doing the actual work. Well, there you go. Nope. Are we gone again? Oh, perfect. Okay. This is another example. This was a big story in the Vatican. It was when Biden was president. And he arrived to meet with Pope Francis. Obviously, a lot of the televisions were reporting from St. Peter's Square, from some ad hoc television studios that were created in St. Peter's Square. And you can see here, you can see how organized it looks. But then the huge amount of coordination and, technical material and stuff that's behind the scenes that you don't see on air. And it's actually quite tough because, if you're doing live TV reports for a 24-hour news channel that on a big breaking news or big international story, that means you've got to be on air on top of the hour every hour, and it leaves very little time to sleep. So in those situations, just to give you a practical example of how tough it gets, you have to try and nap between lives. So here again, you can see the live at St. Peter's Square. And let's see if this works. Maybe we should turn the chairs around and look backward. Yeah, okay, let's see if that works. Okay, this shows you, this is an example of news cover by many international televisions, all in a row. And when you go on air, you don't see it. You just see the correspondent and you see St. Peter's behind them. But here we have the CNN studio, Fox network. You have next to them another American network. I think is ABC further down. This was during COVID, as you can see from the, but it shows you it's literally, let's see. Okay, this should start as well. No, doesn't want to stop. Oh, yeah, it does. So you can see, I mean, behind the scenes, there's a huge amount of work. It looks very easy and simple when you see it on air, but behind the scenes, you can see the technical preparation and the infrastructure that has to be put in place. So here we go. Another example is a media scrum. Very often when you read something in the newspaper, Minister so-and-so said this, said that, Italy wants to scrap, ETS carbon tax or something like that, and ask the EU to, help scrap EU carbon tax on gas-fired thermal power generation, let's say. Very often the news comes out of a situation like this where there's, dozens of journalists. Obviously, the more important the news that could come out from that conversation, the more journalists that will be there. So anyway, this is just very briefly. I wanted to go through this with you. And what I did want to leave you with is a toolkit with which to look at your, future careers and to be able to interact with the press as well. Now, for me, one very important thing is to get across to you is as you develop your future careers, some of you may go into journalism, in which case, feel free to reach out. We'll have questions afterwards. It's a great career. It's really interesting. But like all careers, it's changing because of AI, and that's something that needs to be monitored, and you need to understand where it's going and in what direction. The other thing is, if you go into other careers, so, diplomacy, international organizations, think tanks, research centers and so forth, or, investment banks, wherever you go in your future career, whatever direction you go into, it's always very useful to have knowledge of the press, know how to interact with them, and to develop relationships with the press as well. So one thing I really want to get across is that it's a two-way relationship, because for a journalist, it's really important to have contacts and sources on the ground, because there's a saying that a journalist is only as good as their contacts. So in this case, I would very much encourage you over the years to build up a relationship with journalists. And one very quick and easy way, of course, is, whatever field of expertise you're sort of positioned in, if you're in, if you're an expert on tariffs, or if you're an expert on international trade, or, sanctions, or whichever area of expertise you're positioned in, develop relationships with journalists that cover those areas. And a huge gift you can give journalists is, here's my WhatsApp number, message me whenever you need, any background information on this, any technical information, any quotes, any interviews, whether it's Sunday at 11 o'clock at night, whether it's Tuesday at 6 o'clock in the morning, That's one of the biggest gifts you can give a journalist, because very often we're on deadline, we're on severe deadline. And very often it's very difficult for us to find someone, on a Sunday or on, very early in the morning or late at night. Some of the papers, obviously, the newspapers close late at night. So that's a huge gift you can give journalists. I would actually open up to questions now, if we want, and then we can do some case studies as well. Fantastic. Yeah, let's take one question at a time. Any questions out there? Oh, there's one.
Hello, my name is Nehir. I'm coming from Turkey, and I was gonna ask, like, for students who does not study any like journalism kind of courses in the university, what would you suggest them to how to start a career in journalism? What can be the first point? Thank you.
Thank you, Nahira. That's a really good question. There's sort of two schools of thought, and I'm supportive of both. There's some very, very good courses. There's some good courses in Italy as well, but good courses internationally in terms of journalism. But that isn't obligatory. You can just go apply for an internship and, work on the field and get the experience, because you're pretty much getting what you would get during a course. Obviously, a course is more theoretical, and you're more in a sort of protected environment. If you're, working as an intern for an international broadcaster or for a newspaper, you get thrown in at the deep end from day one, because most newspapers and television broadcasters, news broadcasters, are short-staffed. They've got breaking news all over the place. With the internet, they have day and night news cover. So you would probably end up starting to work in the field, or reporting news cover from one. If you want to go into journalism and you're not thinking of doing a course, then definitely start applying for internships right away, because some of these news organizations accept interns a year early. So, once you start up 10 months before of 10. Is it working? Yeah. Once you start applying 10 months before the end of the, before the start of the internship, you're probably out of time. So, so definitely start right away. And, I'm happy to give you some suggestions if you like. Any other questions?
So, hello, my name is Osama. I have a question. How can a journalist and a reporter protect his psychological what? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With all the news that he's facing, like his main job is about news, and he's seen a lot of bad stuff, wars, kills, assassinations. How can you protect your psychological side with all of this cloud of bad news?
That's a very, very, very good question. That's a very good and timely question. Now, I think the key point about journalists is they have to keep their... Can I try another one? Because I think it comes and goes. Let's try that one. Is that better, I think, because it doesn't come and go? Yeah, that's better. One of the key points about journalists is they have to be objective. They have to be completely separate from the story. They cannot get involved psychologically, because once you get involved psychologically, you become part of the story. It's extremely difficult in war situations, extremely difficult, because there's obviously a massive, the most important human angle in that sort of cover. I would definitely say, as war correspondents, you need time off. You need to get away, decompress, in order to go back in and report without, because if you get too overwhelmed by the story, you're not lucid anymore, I think. You're still reporting because you're trained to be reporting, but you also have to be lucid. And it's a very, very pertinent question. Once you get emotionally involved in the story, and that also includes trauma, obviously, because you can see incidents, tragedies that traumatize you for life sometimes, then if you get emotionally involved in a story, or if you have an opinion that backs one of the two or the three or the four parties in a story, then that's when you become an opinionist, an editorialist, which is a really interesting job, and one that's very interesting. I mean, I love op-eds, I love editorial comments and so forth, but it's a completely different job. I mean, I'm very, very rigid on that, on, you know, not getting involved in the story, to the point that, for example, if I go to a party in Venice, I will not wear evening wear, because if I go in a sort of shishi evening dress, then I'm becoming part of the story. It's becoming confusing. You know, I'm not there. I'm there as a reporter. I'm there as a journalist, and I'm there to do my job. I'm not there because I'm a star at the party. And that's very banal in terms of example compared to, you know, these tragedies that are going on around the world and, you know, covering them. But it is that sort of approach. You really need to, you know, detach yourself. And that can come from spending time away, getting, you know, psychological support. A lot of the news organizations are providing psychological support, obviously, because, you know, journalists are human too. So it's something very important to keep yourself detached from the story. And I would personally say when you're, I mean, I wouldn't personally say, I'd say professionally, when you know you're too involved in, when you know you're involved in the story to the point that it'll affect your reporting, you have to break away. It's an ethical issue at that point.
I'm Andrea, I'm from Rome, and I really appreciate your speech. I was curious to know what you don't like about journalism and difficult barriers that you need to face. Thank you.
What are the most difficult? So barriers.
Barriers, yeah.
I don't think there's anything I don't like about journalism. I mean, I feel very, very lucky. I really enjoy myself. I do completely different news covers. So I do television, I cover the Vatican, I do financial markets, I do energy, I do politics, I do, you know, stars, natural disaster. I do like a bit of everything. And I don't just cover Italy. I cover other European countries, you know, a lot in the UK and so forth. So I feel very, very privileged in that sense. I had worked for 10 years at Bloomberg, so covering banks and insurance companies. And perhaps there it became too technical and too specific to one single field. And that kind of gets a bit too much for me, because you're doing the same thing over and over again, and you're not, and you live in a bubble, because when you're just doing banks and insurance companies and you're looking through, you know, balance sheets and profit and loss accounts all the time, that's all you're doing. You're detached from the rest of reality and everything else that's going on. So perhaps that's something I personally avoided, you know, once I was in a position to be able to do so in terms of journalism. But no, I have to say I really enjoy it, you know. I consider myself very lucky. And the barriers, well, you know, sometimes the barriers are getting information, and the barriers are, you know, getting the information out there, and the pressure you can receive for not putting, you know, for reporting things that people do not want out there. I've had a lot of pressure on, you know, stories that are incisive, critical, that, you know, can get people into trouble because they're doing something that's not exactly, you know, considered right. And so that's probably one of the biggest barriers. And of course, the other barrier is, you know, being able to get the information in the first place. And that's where, you know, it's really important. And I like to underline this to you as you develop your careers, whether you go into journalism or not. Just always remember that, you know, a journalist's worth is their contacts, their contacts. So, you know, if you do develop a relationship with a journalist and, you know, share information with them and, give them support in terms of news and data from, the host country they're covering, then that's, a huge gift you can give to a journalist. I would like to here just talk a moment about off the record and on the record relationships. I like to suggest one thing always. If there's delicate information, always send it in writing and always put in writing, this is off the record. Because if you give a journalist contact some very delicate information and you tell them on the phone, but this is off the record, you cannot cite me, and they cite you, well, that's a problem. If you have it in writing, then, at least you can sleep tranquil nights and not be worried about your name appearing. So, that's something to bear in mind, that, journalists ethically, if you tell them this is off the record, they cannot mention you. They have to protect you as a source. I think in Italy, as in other countries, you're not even forced, you cannot be forced even in court to give up the name of your source. I mean, it's very, very solidly protected. Having said that, the main newspapers and news organizations will absolutely abide to that because it's part of their ethical DNA. But there's so many news organizations out there today that are just internet websites, and you don't know what their ethical standards are. So I would definitely, if you're going to share off the record delicate information, I would definitely only do so with, high-end publications like New York Times, Guardian, Telegraph, Financial Times, etc., etc. Another question.
Hi, I'm Sofia, an Italian student. Thank you for your speech and explaining your career. So I would like to ask you, as an international correspondent, which is, from your perspective, the difference between the career of an international correspondent and the career of an international rapporteur? Because in my mind, I imagine them as two very similar careers and jobs, but since I'm not very much informed on the specific characteristics of them, I would like to hear your point of view on this. Thank you.
What do you mean exactly by international rapporteur?
Well,
Reporter?
Oh, yeah, maybe rapporteur is the French word. I don't know. Yeah, reporter, sorry.
That's fine. They're more or less the same. They're more or less the same. Perhaps a reporter is more on the ground, is more sort of gritty, out on the streets, getting information, one-on-one, chasing down sources, but they're more or less the same. Correspondent is possibly a more formal way of delineating the area of cover. So it can be an Italy correspondent, it can be, a political correspondent, etc., etc. So it's a more formal way of delineating a job title, because, you can say Italy reporter, but it's not very commonly said political reporter. So they're more or less the same. I would say perhaps reporter is more gritty, though, more on the street, more, on the front line, hammering away at getting the information. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Gaia. I wanted to ask you if you do feel secure. I mean, today we woke up with the news of the bomb car by Ranucci, so I wanted to ask you, how do you feel by doing your job when you speak about important stuff?
Well, yeah, it was a tragedy. This, fortunately, no one was hurt. And we can discuss the international angle of that because, obviously press freedom is always important, but there is an interesting international angle to that story. And yes, I'm always very aware that, you can be pressured and you can have a lot of obstruction and even, negative action taken against you. and it can be legal and non-legal action. But, you know, that's the nature of the job. I think politicians are the same probably. And, you know, it's the nature of the job. You have to take it with what it is. Ranucci's comments today in Il Corriere, I think it was, or in Ansa, on the fact that, yes, had been receiving threats and had received a bullet in past weeks or months, were very interesting in that he also said that he'd received threats from abroad. So that's a very interesting angle for a foreign correspondent. Obviously, a foreign correspondent will look at that, but unfortunately, it's quite common around the world. And, you know, there's so many countries in the world that, you know, journalists have threats and maybe property damaged, because fortunately, it was just a question of property being damaged there. There was no one in the car in this particular case. So not everyone may report that story, obviously. But if I were covering that story, if I had the time today, and I don't, unfortunately, because I'm on various other fronts, I'm leaving for a press trip. If I were covering that story, the first thing I'd do is try and find out, you know, what countries, you know, where did these international threats come from? And obviously report for them for that newspaper if it was one of the papers I report for. But very pertinent question. Thank you.
My name is Andrea, and thank you for being here. I have two questions for you. First question is that some of your colleagues, I'm not including you in this, but some of your colleagues do a really deep personal life of some people. And my question is there a line when going into details about someone's personal life? And the second question is, how do you fact check the information given by your source? And has it ever happened that the information was false? Thank you.
Great question. My line with reporting people's personal facts is that if they're relevant to the story, then yes. If they're relevant to their public position, then, you know, they're fair game. I personally may not report them, but, you know, if a colleague does, then for me, if it's adding value and information to the story, then it's fair game. You know, it's probably not nice to be on the receiving side, but you know, we're journalists, we bring the news. If that fact pushes the story forward, that's a technical term with journalists. If it pushes the story forward, then definitely I think it's fine. The other question was, sorry?
How do you fact check the sources?
Great, that's very interesting, actually. Now, you try and cite people. So cite them by name and surname, because, you know, if someone's giving you some information, they could have an ulterior motive to you writing that. I'll give you a very basic example. There's company ABC traded on the stock market, and you come to me and you say, oh, you know, they say they have these assets, but in actual fact, they don't have them. You know, the accounts are wrong. They're fudging the accounts. Now, if I write that, the stock price plunges. And, you know, who knows? You could be wanting to invest in the market and, you know, buy some of the stock cheaply. So you have to very much verify people's motives as well when they provide that information. My rule, and I've inherited this from Bloomberg, is that when I get delicate information and the person won't go on the record, I will verify it with another 2 or 3 sources, depending on how delicate the information is. So, for example, someone in Sicily tells me, oh, tomorrow they're going to announce at the Ministry of Infrastructure that they're canceling the plans to build the bridge to Sicily. I would never write that because it may be some political opponent in Sicily that wants to get this news out there. I would never write that unless he's citing his name. Then it's his responsibility for what he's said. Obviously, in that particular case, I would fact check that as well with the ministry. I would reach out to my ministry contacts and I would say, is this true? This is what I'm hearing. You can tell me off the record. Now, you develop sources over the years. So, you know, my contacts there would probably likely tell me, no, that's completely made up. It's completely false. But, you know, we're not releasing an official statement. So that's an off the record indication that, no, it's absolutely false. Or they could tell me, yeah, it's true. We're going to be announcing it tomorrow. You know, keep 2 o'clock free because we'll have a press conference. We're only alerting people 2 hours before. So, you know, that could be an answer off the record still. Or they could say, yes, officially, I can tell you we're announcing tomorrow that we'll scrap the bridge. And actually, you can write it now and you can cite, you know, a ministry spokesman. But it's very, very, very important to verify the information you put out there, because otherwise it's misinformation, it's incorrect. And, you know, at very least when the person contacts you and says it's incorrect, you have to correct it.
I have a question. Sorry, okay. I wanted to ask you, okay, first of all, I wanted to thank you for your speech. It was really inspiring. I wanted to ask you actually 2 questions. So first, how did you, why did you decide to switch from an economic career to pursue journalism? Because I see them as 2 really different career paths, even because you said for example, People's Magazine that for my knowledge doesn't deal with economics. So maybe it's like completely 2 different fields. And the second, I wanted to ask if you could give your opinion about the position that the Prime Minister of Italy had about not doing press conferences, because she is basically like trying to ditch the press as much as possible. She's not doing press conferences. So if you could also comment on that. Thank you.
So I'll tell you a fun little anecdote about how I ended up in journalism. I studied economics at the LSE, and then I did a master's at Cambridge University. And then I thought, oh, I'd been brought up all over the world. I'd lived in Venezuela, China, Finland, Belgium, the UK, as you can hear, as I was growing up. And then I thought, oh, I'll go to Italy and I'll go and live in Italy for the first time ever in my life. I only have an Italian passport, by the way. And I will sit the diplomatic exams, you know, I'll go into diplomacy. And I came back and they wouldn't recognize LSE and Cambridge at the time for the diplomatic exams. So I started doing an Italian degree, but I said, my goodness, here, I'm studying again. Let me, you know, do some work. Let me, you know, start working. And I started working as a journalist. I started interning, as, you know, we were discussing before. I started with the Associated Press, and then I started at Reuters, and it just was so fun and so interesting. And that I just, you know, like I've almost finished the Italian degree, which, you know, I had to basically redo almost from scratch. And I just left the diplomatic exams and just carried on in journalism. Prior to that, though, I had done a stint at JP Morgan and at Rothschild, so in investment banking, mergers and acquisitions, et cetera, in London and Milan. So, you know, after LSE and before Cambridge. So that's how I got into journalism. I just super enjoyed it. You know, it was so much fun. And yeah, that's how I got into it.
Hi, my name is Monica. You mentioned before how a journalist should be objective, not get involved in the story at all. Don't you think?
Shout.
Okay. Okay. as a humans, we all have biases based on our
Try that one.
where we grow up and
Sorry, can you start the?
Yeah,
book
sorry,
there?
okay. About the objectivity as a journalist. I think we all have biases that change, that lays on our story and change. They are different based on where you grew up and the part of the world you grew up. Okay, so do you think is even possible to be completely objective when telling a story? And also a little farther, maybe, do you think activism could ever be compatible with professional journalism? Thank you.
I'll answer from the last question. No, absolutely not. I don't think activism can be competitive, compatible with journalism. It can be compatible with, being an editorialist or an opinionist, but as a journalist, you have to have an objective point of view. Even so, I think it is very much tarnished and colored by, your context, because for sure, we who are here today live in a very different reality, and it's very subjective, the reality we see and we live and that we can relate to other people from someone who's living in Bangladesh or Myanmar or in Papua New Guinea, and these are extreme case scenarios, but, there's a wide range of, varying realities. So absolutely not. Obviously, you have to do your best. Some news organizations are very stringent about it. I don't know if you know, but for example, Reuters and possibly some other ones will not use the term terrorist because, what is a terrorist to one country is a freedom fighter to another. So, that's a very strong stand in terms of, saying, we have to be objective. There's so many different realities we live in, et cetera, et cetera. Having said that, the international media organizations, at least, the big mainstream top-end newspapers and magazines and news outlets, news agencies are very international today. I mean, Reuters, which is traditionally, historically, the big UK news agency, is now owned by a Canadian company, Financial Times by a Japanese company, and the list goes on and on and on. So hopefully with time and globalization, these differences will be reduced slightly. They'll never be reduced completely, obviously. But that's something I'm very, very aware of. And that's why I also really like working for completely different news organizations. For example, Italy correspondent for TRT World, which is Turkish. I work for an American publication, a Norwegian one. I also work for Chinese state television. I do some news documentaries for them. They have opened an international news arm to, sort of like in the sort of Al Jazeera, BBC, CNN space. So that's CGTN Europe. And that's why I really enjoy, doing that, because we cannot be huddled in our European box, because Europe is absolutely tiny in the grand scheme of things. Unfortunately, we're facing challenges that can make us even tinier economically in coming years and in future years, economically, but also politically and institutionally. And I think a way of combating that is also being aware of this development. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Flavia. Thank you for being here. So I have a question. How do you define the boundary between the ethics of journalism and the ambition to pursue a powerful story? Thank you.
Great question. Never cross the ethical boundaries. Never cross the ethical boundaries. You cannot sell your ethics for professional gain. So I'm very black and white in that. There's, very clear lines, ethical lines, and, you know, you cannot cross those. Sorry if the answer is very short, but
Morning, my name is Leonardo. I'm from Rome as well, and I want to thank you first for your interesting speech. But I was curious about knowing if, since you said you report for People magazine and you were just talking about ethical boundaries, if it has ever happened to you to write a report just for the sake of hype or mainstream information on trending news, and also what do you really think about the so-called paparazzi, and if you consider celebrities' privacy invasions are ethically wrong, or are they just a fair game, as you said before? Thank you.
I'll tell you an anecdote on this from the Venice Film Festival this year. Okay, so first of all, I think invasion of privacy for a public person. So if you're a politician, I'm sorry, I actually didn't answer your question on, I'll get to that. I wasn't avoiding it, I just forgot it. I got so engrossed in the first question, but I'll answer that. So invasion of privacy of a public person, for me, exists behind private confines. So if something is done in an office that's a personal office, or in a house that's a personal house, then that's personal. Obviously, unless it's a crime and some information comes out on that from a third party, you can't go in there and like break into the house and, you know, look at the window and all that, you know, you absolutely can't do that. But, you know, if a politician is doing something in a personal office that's a crime, or, you know, even, you know, an actor or, you know, a business leader, then it could be considered an invasion of privacy. But if it comes out in some way, by, you know, documents being leaked on the internet, or, you know, documents being given to me by a source, etc., then, you know, it's for the good of the public to know that. Obviously, with entertainment news, there's a lot of, you know, cover of personal events and, you know, relationships and things like that. And I'll tell you a little anecdote about Venice this year. So I was at the Venice Film Festival this year, and it involves a lot of, you know, red carpet cover, news cover, you know, interviews with stars, etc. And, you know, every night there's 3 or 4 parties, lots of the stars are there. Sometimes you have access to them, sometimes you don't have access to them. And I went to the Amphar party, which is a very big, high-end international, big international AIDS charity. And, you know, last year there was Banderas, there was Clooney, and, you know, so forth. This year there were a series of, you know, big stars, including Jude Law. Now, I wanted to talk to Jude Law because he was voted sexiest man alive by People magazine 20 years ago, I think. And this year it's the 40th anniversary of Sexiest Man Alive. So I was kind of like keeping an eye on him very clearly. And we were at different tables. And he was with a very beautiful lady. And I saw them, they were getting very affectionate with each other. And I was like, no, I don't want to report this. This is no, I don't want to report. But you have to, because it's a public event and it's, so I was like, oh, I even had a video, and as a journalist, you have to report it. But I was like, I really don't want to do this. Fortunately, it was his wife. So, you know, but that's fair game because they're at a charity event. Had he been, you know, had someone been there with someone, you know, he wasn't supposed to be with or something like that, or, you know, caught off on camera, you know, in an affectionate pose with someone he, you know, he or she wasn't supposed to be having an affectionate pose with, then that's, you know, that's unfortunately what you're there to cover as well as, you know, the event itself. Let me answer your question. Ask me the question again. It was, you know, what do I think of Italian Premier's decision not to really talk to the press? That's a difficult one because as a journalist, I really, really want to, hear what everyone has to say, and I want to get a chance to ask questions. And I have to say, her ministers are very accessible often because they speak a lot, so you just wait for them outside. And, there's the media scrum situations with hundreds, dozens and dozens of journalists. When I was at Bloomberg and I was covering the financial markets, and anything we would write risked moving the stock price. This was basically after LSE, after AP, after Reuters, et cetera. So I went into hardcore financial markets. A lot of my friends from the LSE were all at the City of London or on Wall Street. So I had the most amazing sources, obviously. But I would always say to my friends, never speak to a journalist, never. because I would talk to them off the record, but my concern very often with journalism is that anything anyone says, if it's quite long, can be taken out of context. So if I tell you, today in Rome, we're at this event. It's an absolutely beautiful day. There's blue sky, sun, it's hot. It's as if it's, May in Italy, et cetera. But then at 3 o'clock, gray clouds appeared and it rained. It rained nonstop. But, then it stopped and the blue sky came out again. And it was just a 10-minute, window, et cetera. Now, I can take that comment I said about gray clouds appeared and it rained nonstop. And that's a quote. I said that, but it can say the opposite of what I was saying. So that's something to also bear in mind when you develop your careers and you talk to journalists. Make sure the message is very, very clear. And, ask them if the quote they're going to use, because very often the quotes are just 2 sentences. And it's actually very difficult to cut a long comment and find 2 sentences that make sense and slot into the story. So now when I interview people for television, for news bulletins, if you watch TG5 or you watch CNN, news bulletins, each piece is maximum 3 minutes long. That means if the correspondent does a stand-up and if they have a person they've interviewed, that person's comment will be 20 seconds long. So bear that in mind. Now, when I interview people, and I've been doing this for 15 years, I tell them, the comment I'll use will not be longer than 20, 30 seconds. So please do not speak for 10 minutes because it's going to be impossible for me to cut out, the real point you're making. I tell them, let's talk beforehand so I understand what your message is and what you're trying to get across. But when we do the interview, summarize it for that answer in a few sentences, because otherwise it gets really messy and it exposes you to the wrong message being taken out.
Hello, my name is Theodore. I'm from France. Thank you very much for your intervention. I had a very generalistic question, quite reprobative as well, about artificial intelligence. But yesterday we met another correspondent from El Periodico, and she had a very optimistic point of view about artificial intelligence and its impact in the job. What's your opinion about it? Do you consider it as a threat? How do you work in your daily life with it?
I love it. I absolutely love it. I don't find it to be I find it more to be an instrument and a tool for journalism rather than a threat. It can be a threat for whoever's out there churning, regurgitating press releases, taking press releases and just spinning them around and, changing them and summarizing them for their newspaper. But I think the true gift of a journalist, the true strength of a journalist is their ability to go out, speak to people and get that information from the people, interview them, you know, build contacts, you know, interact with a human element. And I think, well, for sure for now, but for quite a while, I think AI will not be able to go out and interview people. So I absolutely love it. I mean, there's some great AI tools. Have you tried Notebook LM? Oh, it's amazing, amazing. So the one that does the podcast, unbelievable. I mean, it's it's incredible. Next question. Any other questions?
Hello, I'm Cecilia. Thank you so much for being here with us. I wanted to ask if being a journalist can get individualistic, in the sense that we saw that you collaborate with lots of people, maybe in the newsroom, but with other colleagues in your same newspaper. Do you feel in competition with each other for getting the best news in the shortest time possible? Your point of view in general. Thank you.
That's a very good point. Journalists are very competitive, obviously. It's interesting because I always say, you know, journalists make such a big thing of bylines. So, you know, the name of the journalist that signs the piece. But I always say it's only journalists that know the bylines in actual fact. Because if I give you some bylines of, you know, top-end colleagues at the Financial Times, you're going to be like, oh, I don't know them. So yeah, it's a very, very competitive business, and it has to be, because that's how you move the news forward. I personally, I find myself very lucky in that, like all foreign correspondents, very often it's just 1 or 2 or 3 people in the country. So you're so understaffed and overwhelmed with the amount of work there is to do that there's no territoriality often about what gets done. Competitive, yes, you know, I think we're all competitive. A good journalist has to be competitive. They've got to get the news out first. They've got to get it accurate. They've got to get it out before their competitors. But the sort of role in a foreign correspondent position is a bit different from being in a big newsroom in London or New York, or even, you know, here in a newsroom in ANSA or Corriere, where you're probably battling, you know, competing with other colleagues for, you know, to be able to cover a particular story. Yeah, but very good points. Question over here.
That's one. So I'm Diletta too from Rome, and I just wanted to ask, sometimes looking from the outside, the environment of journalism has some hot topics. I mean, usually some journals ask young students to write for free articles, and they are not paid. And this way, journals avoid to pay older and more expertise journalists. As well, I was thinking that most of journalists are not really well paid. Sometimes I hear a lot of complaints about this. And looking more to bigger things, I read actually a statement from United Nations that say that more than 214 journalists has been killed during the war of Gaza, both from Israel and Palestine. So I wanted to ask if you think that journalists have enough guarantees, enough protections, or you think that probably is an environment that is quite left by his own? Because for a young person, it's not really, I mean, journalism is expiring, it's a beautiful career, but if a young student look at the perspectives, maybe it's not really protected as a worker. So I wanted your opinions.
You're absolutely right. Interestingly enough, when I started off 30 years ago, internships were not paid. So, you know, journalists, I would say any big journalist now on the field started with unpaid internships. I think it's kind of the nature of the business, because I think it's really important to know you have the resilience to go through something like that. It makes sense in a way. I mean, it would have been much better to be paid, obviously, but I think only those that really wanted to become journalists, you know, went through the unpaid internship, et cetera, et cetera. So it's difficult. Having said that, it's actually quite a complicated career today. One thing I very much encourage everyone to do is to also think about, you know, portfolio careers. So whatever you do, you know, you'll become an expert in something. So if you go and work in the UN, or you become a diplomat, or, you know, you work in a think tank, whatever you do, you'll become an expert in something or in some territorial area. Try and also find some analysis, consulting, journalism work tied to that. It can really be anything, because I think this is a personal point of view, and this is how I've structured my career in the last sort of 17, 18 years. But I think you get a lot more, and you can also give a lot more back if you're not like in your own little bubble where you have no interaction with the outside world. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
No, that was the last question. I don't know if you have any closing remarks. Otherwise, we can close the session right now.
No, it's been great to talk to you. If you want to, you know, reach out, and if other questions come to mind, feel free to reach out. Feel free to connect up on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and enjoy the course and enjoy the Diplomacy Festival. This year's lineup is amazing. Thank you. Yeah.